Hello everybody, my name is Joy of Crime Art, and another year has come and gone, which can only mean one thing. Why, it means it's time for us to once again look back at the year of animation, of course. Yeah, this is kind of a thing I like to do around here. For those who didn't see last year's video, here's how this is going to work. Basically, I'm going to go over 2022 in terms of animation, the new shows, the pieces of news, anything else I just happen to find interesting. And then at the end, I'll rank all the new series from worst to best, give the year an overall grade, and decide which network or streaming service quote-unquote won the year. Theatrical animation and anime won't be included, however, as this video is long enough as it is. Though before we start digging too deep into things, I want you to keep in mind that as more shows are being made and stretched across different streaming platforms, it becomes a lot more difficult to keep up with all the new series coming out, so I wasn't able to watch everything. So rather than looking at this video as a definitive guide to 2022 in animation, I think we ought to look at this video as my personal experience with the year, focusing on the things that have the biggest impact on me personally. So with all that out of the way, let's dive in and talk about 2022 in animation.
Whoa! What's happened to our box? It's got a star on it, and it's shiny and hot.
The year got off to an immediate start as literally on New Year's Day we got the premiere of We Baby Bears on Cartoon Network. As the name implies, We Baby Bears is a spin-off to Cartoon Network's popular series We Bare Bears, a series that followed three bear brothers, Grizzly, Panda, and Ice Bear, going on wacky misadventures in the San Francisco Bay Area. Though in that show, we would often get episodes flashing back to the bears as babies, traveling all around the world trying to find a place to become their forever home. So We Baby Bears just takes that idea and expands upon it, following the baby bears as they travel not around the world, but straight up around the multiverse via a magical box they gain by wishing on a shooting star. You have the power to travel across all these different fantastical universes, and you decide to settle down in frickin' California? So if it wasn't obvious, the series is definitely a big departure from what We Bare Bears was. While We Bare Bears certainly had some fantastical elements to it, I mean it's about talking bears after all, the show was still fairly grounded in reality, focusing on slice-of-life adventures that for the most part could happen in the real world. While in contrast, this series goes for a straight-up fantasy, which is definitely a bit jarring. Also jarring is the art style change. The series goes for this cutesy chibi anime aesthetic, and I don't know why. Like, what's the correlation between We Bare Bears and anime? Yeah, in the original series, Panda was depicted as a dirty weeb, but that's about it. It's not even like a subtle thing either, it's very in your face. Heck, We Baby Bears and We Bare Bears don't even share the same creator. Granted, the creator of We Baby Bears worked on We Bare Bears, but still. The two series are so different, I kinda question why this show is a spin-off and not its own thing, outside of the fact that We Bare Bears is extremely popular overseas, specifically in Asia. Which now that I think about might also explain why the show took on a more cutesy anime aesthetic. But how's the show itself? It's good, if you go into it with the understanding that the show is aimed at a much younger demographic, even compared to other Cartoon Network series. Like, a lot of episodes have really basic morals, things like say please and stuff like that. Honestly, I feel like the show would almost feel more at home on Cartoon Nito as opposed to Cartoon Network, as it almost feels like a preschool show at times, albeit a pretty good preschool show. The universes they travel to are fairly one-note, but they're designed well, and I admire the creativity it must have taken the crew to create so many worlds that all feel unique. However, due to the fact that each episode takes place in a different world, we don't really get a lot out of them. It's like, hey, here's this new and creative world, ripe for exploration. And now on to the next thing. The bears themselves feel very in line with how they acted in the original show, which is a good thing. Though part of the downside of the show being a prequel is that they were unable to get any of the supporting cast of the original show in this series. No Chloe, no Ranger Tabes, no Charlie, but there's this otter who's basically just Charlie, and is even played by Charlie's voice actor, but isn't Charlie for some reason. I guess they're trying to keep continuity with the original series since Charlie's debut episode was him meeting the bears for the first time, but the shows the bears traveling through dimensions in a magical cardboard box. The sort of assume the series isn't supposed to be in continuity with the original. We Baby Bears may not be the deepest or funniest series, but it has a charm to it. And as someone who's currently in the process of trying to move out with my brothers, I found the series really relatable in a personal sense. The series won't be for everyone, and I don't think it really captures the magic the original series had, but for a show that's clearly aimed at a really young audience, I think you could do a lot worse.
I just wanted my cheese.
But if you're looking for something more mature, perhaps Smiling Friends on Adult Swim will be more your speed. The series was created by Michael Cusack, who created the other Adult Swim series YOLO Crystal Fantasy, and Zach Heidel, a YouTuber known for his work on the popular Let's Play series Uni Plays. The series had a lot of hype to it prior to its release, which is why Adult Swim decided to do the only logical thing and air the whole season in one night without any advertisement. And the funny thing is, this wouldn't be the first time they've done something like this either. I'm calling it now, whenever Pibby finally comes out, it's going to be released just like this. The series follows Pim and Charlie, two critters whose job is to go around and make people smile, which is a really fun premise that allows for lots of creative possibilities. The character dynamic is really good, with Pim being your standard naive optimist and Charlie being the apathetic straight man. I like how genuine Pim and Charlie's friendship feels despite their different outlooks on life, and they play off each other really well. I think a lot of this comes from the voice acting, which has this real natural improvisational feel to it. With characters often stammering or talking over each other, it helps make the characters feel more like actual people. The grounded characters and voice acting does a good job to contrast the rest of the series, which is just plain nuts. It's sometimes hard to explain the humor of something, since explaining a joke usually makes the joke less funny by default. Let me just say that this show has to be one of the funniest series I've seen in a long time. From the snappy dialogue to the pure absurdity of the situations involved, to call the show strange would be an understatement, but it never becomes too weird to the point where it feels like it's being random for the sake of being random. The animation I also find really appealing. It looks a bit cheap, but in a charming way. They do this thing called animating in twos, where they just draw two frames and flash between them really fast without any in-betweens, and it consistently got a laugh out of me. They even experiment with different animation styles at times, from stop motion to rotoscope to even live action. The show has a real attention to detail, with lots of jokes in the background that I didn't notice on my first viewing, which gives the series a lot of value on rewatch. The series is also a lot less cynical than your average adult cartoon, which is kind of refreshing. Like, yeah, there are still some moments of black comedy and moments where the characters are a bit unlikable, but it's not as frequent as other adult cartoons, which is good and helps make the moments that are more messed up a lot more unexpected. I can't recommend the series enough. I'm not sure if I say it's the best Adult Swim series, though it might be. But due to combining the improvisational dialogue of shows like Rick and Morty and the surrealism of shows like Aqua Teen Hunger Force, I do feel like it might be one of the most definitive Adult Swim series, resulting in a series that is easily one of the best things 2022 had to offer. One of the best things 2022 had to offer. Meanwhile, Netflix gave us the Cuphead show, based on the popular video games that I have never played. When the series was first announced, I was a bit hesitant. For one, while I can acknowledge their importance to the medium, I've never really been a fan of the classic cartoons from the 30s and 40s. There are ones I like, obviously, but they're never really my thing. And while I never played Cuphead, I always figured the main appeal of it was the fact that it was a video game that looked like a cartoon. So translating that to animation essentially gave us a cartoon that looks like a cartoon. And even if we're getting more specific and talking about a cartoon replicating older cartoons, we already have stuff like the Animaniacs reboot and the Looney Tunes cartoons on HBO Max that fill that niche. So it didn't really seem all that new or interesting. However, with all that said, upon watching the series, I will say that I enjoyed it more than I was expecting to. The series follows the adventures of brothers Cuphead and Mugman living in the Inkwell Isles with their grandpa Kettle. Cuphead and Mugman are both fairly likable characters, with Cuphead being the slightly more irresponsible one and Mugman being the slightly more cautious one, though I do kind of wish the series did a bit more to differentiate them, as they do feel a bit similar at times. However, my favorite character would have to be the Devil, who's a really fun villain, who tries to capture Cuphead's soul after technically winning it in a carnival game but was unable to collect it. He's a fun, hammy villain who manages to be goofy without ever coming across as too pathetic. I also love the way he's animated. You can tell that the people working on the series were inspired by characters like him from the Powerpuff Girls or Aku from Samurai Jack. In fact, the show animation is probably the biggest highlight. It nails the classic 1930s aesthetic, with the hand-painted backgrounds and the more muted color scheme. They even implement model backgrounds for certain scenes, which is something that was done in a lot of old Popeye cartoons, which is a really nice touch. The fact that the characters are obviously done digitally is a bit jarring. It would have been nice if they were drawn traditionally too, just like they were in the games, but that obviously would have taken a lot longer and probably cost a lot. I get it. I was expecting the show to have your standard 1930s slapstick cartoon format, with Cuphead and Mugman trolling some bad guy every episode, you know, like Animaniacs or the Looney Tunes cartoons. But to my surprise, it's not really that kind of cartoon at all. They used a lot more plot and character focus, even having some slight continuity. And even the way the shot composition is done feels kind of modern, which on one hand makes the series feel a lot less true to what it's clearly trying to homage, but on the other hand it makes me like the series more since, as I said earlier, those types of cartoons never really appealed to me all that much. The show has some flaws, however. Cuphead can border on the edge of being a bit too annoying at times, and also despite liking the show I never really found it all that funny, but it's still charming and has great animation and a great soundtrack. It's still not something that really appeals to me specifically, but I can still acknowledge its quality. If you're a fan of the games, or if this just seems like your thing, you should definitely check it out. While we're on the topic of Cuphead, I wonder what else Netflix is up to this year. Uh-oh! So yeah, on the whole, this year hasn't really been the best for things on the Netflix front, with a massive overhaul happening to their animation division, resulting in a lot of employees being laid off and several projects being scrapped mid-production, including Boyle and Trouble from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic creator Lauren Faust, an animated adaptation of the Bones comic series, and a cartoon based on the children's book Anti-Racist Baby, among others. Not Anti-Racist Baby! But why is all this happening? You see, Netflix is a bit of a bind. The problem is that at this point, everyone who's gonna get Netflix pretty much already has. Netflix audience hasn't really been able to grow. In fact, Netflix has actually been losing subscribers due to the streaming sphere becoming so much more competitive. Sure, Netflix still has millions of subscribers, but a lot of that money they make from that just goes back into Netflix. I mean, just think about how many originals Netflix makes, or how many shows they need to pay to keep the license for. And when you're unable to gain new subscribers or in a business that basically requires constant growth to appease investors, you have to find other ways to make more money, which in Netflix's case includes incorporating paid advertisements, cracking down on password sharings, raising the price, and cutting back on production costs, which includes canceling series that Netflix doesn't think will be profitable, including animation. Because as much as I love shows like Hilda, She-Ra, and Kipo, they all pair in comparison to the animated series that really pays the bills. Boss Baby back in business. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Apparently the show does like crazy well. According to people who work at Netflix, it's the standard that Netflix higher-ups want all their animated series to reach, which honestly is just funny. Netflix cancelled Anti-Racist Baby to make room for more Boss Baby. I think we know where their values lie. I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't a bit concerned though. Netflix has been responsible for some of the most ambitious and interesting animated series over the past several years, pushing the envelope in ways I feel wouldn't be possible by conventional television. Is all that innovation going to stop in order to focus on safer, cheaper content in an attempt to cut cost? Hopefully everything will work out and these canceled projects will just be outliers, just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. But only time will tell.
Game on, you stinky space bugs! Here's the surge!
I feel like every year has at least one big finale for the cartoon community to collectively lose their minds over, and this year was no exception, as Disney Channel's Amphibia concluded this year. Spoilers ahead if you haven't seen the show, just FYI. As a quick insight into my thoughts on the series as a whole, I found it to be a good series overall, with likable characters, great world building, and enjoyable comedy. Though I thought the series did suffer a bit due to feeling a bit derivative of other similar series, having sort of an all over the place pacing, and feeling really held back by the channel it aired on. But it was still a fun show despite its shortcomings. But how was the finale? One thing I do like about the finale is that they don't try to wrap everything up in just one episode. They do it over the course of a couple, which helps as this finale is really dense, as Anne and Co are forced to stop King Andrias' invasion of Earth while also trying to free Marcy from the influence of the Core. Every character gets a moment to shine, with the various character arcs reaching their fitting conclusion. I really love how action-packed and over-the-top this finale is. In fact, it kind of makes me wish that the whole series had this kind of energy, as one of my problems I did have with Amphibia was how standard it often felt. But I'll be real with you, I had a hard time taking any of it seriously. Like, it's just doing so much. Every time it looked like things were wrapping up, BAM! They throw some new plot point or twist at you, sometimes without it even being properly foreshadowed beforehand. It's like the crew were trying to figure out what type of series finale they wanted and said, all of them! Do all of them! Resulting in a finale that I can only describe as a combination of the Powerpuff Girls, Majora's Mask, Kill la Kill, Madoka Magica, Space Dandy, and Red vs. Blue Season 7 all wrapped up into one. Like, there's a moment where I watch our heroes flying into space using their magical girl superpowers to stop the alien robot from crashing the moon into the planet, where I just have to ask, how did we get here? Wasn't the show originally about frogs?
That's really dumb. But he's so cool! But that's so dumb!
Amphibia's finale is a bit of a mess, and probably either needed a few more episodes to give all their ideas the time they needed, or should have just cut some of the ideas altogether. But I can't lie and say I didn't have a ton of fun watching it. Honestly, I think it was the highlight of the show for me. Had the entire series been this cracked, I think I probably would have gotten into the series even more. I guess you can say the series went out on a high note. The end we were watching over the course of the entire series died and is never coming back.
Hello, I'm Pauline Phoenix. We'll be at my very own theme park.
Opportunity at Phoenix Park's Dead End attraction. Please arrive at sundown.
We also got Dead End Paranormal Park on Netflix, the latest in the ever-growing subgenre of hell cartoons, which is for whatever reason slowly becoming a subgenre. The series, based on a webcomic which itself was based on a cartoon Hangover short of all things, follows Barney and Norma, two teenagers who find themselves working at the famous Phoenix Parks, a Dollywood pastiche which unbeknownst to most happens to be filled with all forms of supernatural and demonic threats. just like the real Dollywood. Along the way, they're joined by Barney's pet dog Pugsley, who gains the ability to talk after absorbing some demonic energy, and a low-level demon named Courtney, who's trying to find her way back to hell, and is basically just a discount to Amethyst from Steven Universe. Series is something I feel like we haven't gotten in a while, being a comedy horror series, and I want to give the series props for actually trying to scare the audience. Granted, I never found it to be that scary, but I think if you're a little kid, some of these scenes would be pretty intense. The series has some guts in more ways than one. Probably the thing that the series is most known for is its representation, with Barney being gay and transgendered and Norma being autistic and bisexual. And I give the series props for actually doing something with these facts and incorporating these elements into the plot, as opposed to having it be a blink and you miss it thing like a lot of rep you see in cartoons. Again, I think that's one of the advantages of having your series on a service like Netflix. You can get away with a lot more. However, I wasn't really able to get that into most of the characters, unfortunately. I found most of them either be fairly boring or unlikable. They're also not very good at being protagonists. I don't really want to get too heavy into spoilers, but like in the season 1 finale, only Pugsley and Courtney are really involved in the climax, while Barney and Norma don't really do anything to help despite being half our main cast. I'm also not really a fan of how the show looks. It's reminiscent of shows like Hilda, but it doesn't really seem to match the tone the series is going for. Like, the series is supposed to be a darker horror series aimed at an older audience, but the colors are so saturated and everything looks so round and soft, which doesn't look very threatening. And the show's depiction of hell has to be one of the most generic depictions of hell I've ever seen. It just looks like Hell of a Boss, or Devil May Care, or one of the 20 other different Hell cartoons. Seriously, why is this becoming a subgenre? They do put this little 3D filter over everything, like something out of one of my thumbnails, which is a nice touch and kind of matches the sort of cheesy horror movie atmosphere the series is going for, but other than that and a few outlier scenes that have some nice lighting to them, I couldn't really get that much into the series art stuff. I really wasn't feeling the show for the first couple of episodes, but I will say that things did start to pick up near the end of the first season. I like how we end up having multiple bad guys, each with different motives, who keep switching allegiances with each other based on whatever will help them achieve their personal goals. And there's this really good musical episode where all the songs seriously slap. Watching this episode made me genuinely wonder why the show wasn't a musical series. It was easily my favorite episode I saw. I didn't have the time or ability to check out the second season before making this review, so I really don't know how well it holds up. From what was initially released, the series is kind of a mixed bag. Even with the elements I did like, I think the somewhat underwhelming leads hold the series back a bit too much for me, but I know the series definitely has its fans, so if this series sounds at all interesting to you, I would definitely recommend giving it a shot. This was a big year in the larger media space as well, as AT&T finalized their sale of Warner Bros. To Discovery. This obviously has lots of large-reaching consequences, and I won't be able to go over all of it. But the TLDR is that AT&T took on a massive $3 billion debt with their acquisition of Warner Media back in 2018, leading AT&T to sell the company to Discovery just barely over 3 years later in exchange for Discovery taking on all their debt. So what exactly has changed? Well, per usual with any big corporate buyout, there's been a lot of shake-up in terms of corporate management. This is common for any big deal like this, and one of the results was Tom Ashton being let go as Cartoon Network president after less than 2 years, making him the William Henry Harrison of Cartoon Network presidents. Tom Ashton literally just showed up, canceled Infinity Train, aired Crazy Rich Asians, and left. Refuses to elaborate further. Tom Ashton's tenure as president is honestly pretty hard to judge just due to how short it was. It didn't really feel like he had enough time to really turn the network into whatever he wanted it to be. I mean, outside of the Cartoonito stuff, not a single series greenlit under his tenure has even aired yet. But while I probably wouldn't watch Cartoonito or Acme Night if I'd still had Cartoon Network, I still respect the guy for taking a risk and really trying his best to transform Cartoon Network into a channel that could appeal to everybody. The new guy in charge is Michael O'Lean, who's actually the interim president before Asham, making him the Grover Cleveland of Cartoon Network presidents. He's also the current president of Adult Swim, where we're running both. While Tom Ashton's goal was seemingly to try to broaden Cartoon Network's appeal as wide as possible in order to attract viewers who wouldn't normally watch Cartoon Network, Michael O'Lean seems like he wants to return Cartoon Network to its roots, focusing on making cartoons that appeal to not just kids but adults as well, setting Adventure Time as a prime example of what he wants for the network going forward. But he's only been president for a few months now, so it's a bit too early to form an opinion on him. Back to Warner Bros. As a whole. The company has been completely rebranded, now officially going by Warner Bros. Discovery. The new man in charge is David Zaslav.
He's history's greatest monster!
And his main job as president is to balance the budget and get Discovery out of its debt, resulting in massive layoffs, canceling projects, and the removal of several series from HBO Max, with anime content being hit the hardest. Series like But why is he doing all this? Well, it all comes down to residuals. When a show airs on TV or a streaming service, you oftentimes have to pay the cast and crew even after the series is already done. So by removing series that don't perform as well, Zaslav and Discovery get out of paying those residuals. And targeting animated content just makes the most sense, as animation is generally more expensive to make than live action, as well as having a much smaller reach. As much as we in the cartoon community feel the loss of these series, to your average HBO Max subscriber, as long as they don't touch Rick and Morty, probably won't notice.
You're gone. 7:30 and our daughter's in bed. You're gone.
Outcome where you survive.
You're gone.
See? Email us, me too.
You're gone.
Now, most of the series that have been removed from HBO Max can still be purchased legally on sites like Amazon and iTunes. Heck, some are lucky enough to still be available to stream in other services like Hulu, and some even have physical releases. But some of these series are not so lucky. Like, for example, Final Space, which wasn't just removed from streaming but was written off entirely, meaning the company listed the series as a financial loss on their taxes and can apply for a tax refund from the government, as long as they can't make any more money off the series going forward. So not only is Final Space not on HBO Max anymore, but legally can never be brought back to the service unless Discovery is willing to pay the US government back on their refund. The series isn't available to buy on Amazon or iTunes, it can't air on TV ever again, even the DVDs have halted production. First 2 seasons are still on Verve and Netflix in some other countries. I assume it's part of some pre-existing contract. Once those contracts are over, the series will just be gone, unable to ever be viewed again by legal means. At least Final Space got to air though. Scoob Holiday Heist, a sequel to 2020's Scoob that was intended to be released direct to HBO Max, was written off before it was ever released. Was the movie finished?
Yes.
That's it?
No.
Though I do want to be clear, it's not just an animation issue. Live action shows and movies have also been hit as well. Honestly, I think it goes without saying that I feel like this is bad. The removal of content, even Max Originals, from your service isn't a good look. Like, I know Santa Inc. was bad, but even I don't think the series deserved to be unpersoned. And obviously it's bad from a consumer standpoint because you're losing content. Close enough for the series that made me decide to get to HBO Max in the first place. Now if I wanted to watch it, I would have to buy it on Amazon. But also from a business sense, it's not really a good move either. Several people in the industry have called Discovery out on this, saying that doing this will result in souring relationship with talent. And I have to agree. Are people going to want to pitch projects to Discovery now when they know that if their series or movie underperforms, there's a chance that they will be scrubbed from existence, never to be seen or heard from again? Discovery stocks have also plummeted to a near cartoonish degree. Ohio is suing them for some reason, and David Zaslav has become one of the most hated men in the entire entertainment industry. And while it's easy to make fun of him, the fact of the matter is, if it wasn't Zaslav, it would have been someone else. Warner Brothers was in debt, and Zaslav's job was to get the company out of debt. Like, I don't know about you, but if someone asked me, hey, we need $3 billion right now, I wouldn't know what to do. And AT&T mishandled Warner Brothers a lot under their tenure, putting themselves in massive debt just to buy it, and spending way too much on HBO Max at launch in hopes of making it a hit. Like, I liked movies being released on HBO Max day and day with their theatrical releases in 2021, but that probably wasn't a very smart idea if your goal was to make money. Neither is spending $500 million on a contract for South Park that only lasts 5 years, or spending another $500 million on Just Friends, or spending $300 million on a separate streaming service just for CNN when you could just put the CNN stuff on HBO Max. I mean, in 2022, Warner Brothers had to push several movies back to 2023, not because the movies weren't finished, but because Warner Brothers literally couldn't afford to pay theaters to air them. That's not something that happens to companies that are doing alright. But keep in mind, I don't want to defend Zaslav either. I think the way he's gone about a lot of his decisions haven't really been the best. Not giving creators a heads up on the series they worked so hard on being removed, and even saying things to the effect of nothing that would have done our company any good was lost. It's a really messy situation without much of a happy ending. When discussing the future of the company, Zaslav said that he wants to cut back on big budget projects going straight to streaming, and focus more on theatrical films again. Hopefully this tactic, combined with selling off the streaming rights to some of their series to competing services, will result in the company successfully climbing out of its debt. And when that happens, maybe some of these shows will be able to see the light of day again. It's a long shot, but we can only hope. Cause for all the bad things that have gone down, I still want Warner Brothers to succeed, even if it's just to prevent something like this from happening in the future. The last thing we need is for the company to continue to perform badly and be bought up by some bigger corporation, continuing the entertainment industry down the path of monopolies.
Hey, everybody! This is my daughter. Kiss her ass or I'll slaughter your children.
Proud of you!
Next we have FXX's Little Demons. Oh dang it! Another one? I get it, Hollywood, you want us to worship Satan, turn down the agenda. Little Demons follows Chrissy, your average 13-year-old girl who discovers that her father is actually Satan. Now Chrissy has to learn how to control her newfound demon powers and learn to come to terms with her demonic heritage, all while her dad tries to turn her down a path of darkness and her Sarah Connor-esque mother Laura tries to keep her on the straight and narrow. It's like the satanic version of El Tigre. At first glance, the series feels like your very run-of-the-mill adult animated sitcom, with your typical adult cartoon humor and borderline sociopathic main leads, which I didn't really get into. But the series has some nice touches that help the series stand out a bit more. The staging is a bit more ambitious than most adult animated series, and the series experiments with different camera angles. I was also pretty drawn to a lot of the character drama. While a lot of the cast aren't exactly the most likable, the show does a good job of making it clear why they act the way they do. The show also isn't afraid to get more serious at times, with moments that really try to hit you in the feels, and they're pretty effective. While I didn't create the series, the show was executively produced by Dan Harmon, one of the co-creators of Rick and Morty, and frankly the show kind of has that vibe to it, for better or worse, with the way it handles dysfunctional families through a fantastical setting, and tries to give sympathetic moments to these objectively pretty awful people. The show still has some problems. Like I said earlier, the characters are kind of unlikable, and the show's depiction of hell and demons, while a little bit different from other series, still feels a tad generic. Going into this, I figured this would be your fairly average adult cartoon, but it was a little better than that. If you're a fan of these types of adult animated series, I would definitely recommend giving Little Demons a watch, as I haven't really seen that many people talk about it.
Every day's a new surprise.
When you're learning with us guys, we live in an actual nightmare!
Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the series finally came out this year after being announced all the way back in 2018. Do puppet shows even count as animation? And it was either this or talking about Slip and Jimmy, so I'm gonna say that it does. For context, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared was a web series created by Becky Sloan and Joe Pelling, basically being Sesame Street on nightmare fuel. The series followed 3 puppets, Red Guy, Yellow Guy, and Duck, who were told a variety of lessons each episode with things always going south by the end. You'd think this would get boring and predictable after a while, but the show managed to stay interesting with its use of clever writing, catchy songs, and really impressive visuals for a crowdfunded YouTube project, resulting in a very quality series overall. But that was just the web series. How does the series translate to television? One thing I do admire about the TV series is how it has a bit of a different vibe from the web series. The web series had a pretty basic format. The teacher shows up, sings a song, something messed up happens, vague lore to keep the map house of the world invested. And while the TV series does this too, there's a lot more focus on the characters and telling jokes. I think this is a good decision, as I don't really think the format of the web series would have been able to work given the longer runtime. The show is very funny, and I think it's one of the series' strongest aspects, combining the surrealism of the situation with its very dry delivery to everything. Now that the characters' personalities are more defined, it's easier to have jokes where the characters can just kind of bounce off one another. However, while the series is really funny, I do feel like there's some pretty long gaps between the jokes. It might be just because this is a British series, and I know British comedy has a tendency to be a lot drier than the American comedy that I'm used to, but the pacing just felt a bit slow to me. Part of me thinks the series might have worked better in an 11-minute format as opposed to a 22. The series doesn't feel as horror-heavy as the web series was, focusing more on telling jokes. In fact, I'd say a lot of the teachers in the series are a lot tamer compared to the teachers found in the web series. Heck, our main leads often feel just as, if not more psychotic as the teachers at times, which I do admit hurts some of the contrast. But overall, I found the series very enjoyable. And I think the series handled the transition from web series to television series a lot better than a lot of other similar series have. I think I prefer the web series a bit more on the whole, but the two are pretty different experiences that are both good in their own rights. I recommend giving the series a watch, though if you're outside of the UK, you'll have to use a VPN, as the series isn't legally available anywhere else, though the series is definitely worth the effort and deserves the support. Cartoon Network also celebrated their 30th anniversary this year. I mean, they did have a lot to celebrate due to them barely making it to their anniversary alive and all. The celebration began about a month prior, but they started airing reruns of some of their older shows on the channel every weeknight. However, the way they did it was kinda weird, with where Mondays and Fridays they would air a random show, while Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday were all tied to a specific series. Courage, Billy and Mandy, and Edda and Eddie respectively. Which are great shows, but like, what makes them so special? Who did they sleep with? They aired some specials throughout the month, which was nice. There was a special anniversary music montage thing on HBO Max. They put the full series collection of a lot of their more obscure series on iTunes. They released a complete series DVD box set of both Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends and Edda and Eddie, which was really unexpected, even if the Edda and Eddie box set is still missing some episodes. They even uploaded some full episodes of their shows on their YouTube channel. Nothing huge, but still enough little things to prove that they were making an effort. But that was all leading up to the actual day. On the main channel, Cartoon Network aired birthday and party themed episodes of a lot of their shows, both old and new. Though I will say there was a bit more emphasis on the newer series, which should be there, But these series air all the time, so it would have been nice if we gotten some more airtime to some of the less represented series. But they also did a YouTube live stream airing episodes of many fan favorite series, old and new, with old bumpers played in between. They had some nice variety here, even including some Inquired shows like Teen Titans and Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. They even ended up having some surprising choices like Cow and Chicken, which isn't even on HBO Max, and Villainous, a show that until now had only aired on Cartoon Network Latin America. Maybe it's just because this was the only aspect of the anniversary that I could actually partake in, given that I no longer have cable, but to me, this was definitely the highlight of the celebration. Except that the actual anniversary livestream broke about 2/3 of the way through, and just kept looping back to the beginning and wouldn't be fixed for a couple days. I have to admit that kind of killed the hype just a little bit. Oops! Overall, I think Cartoon Network handled their 30th anniversary pretty well. I don't think it was as good as their 20th, that felt like a year-long event and had special bumpers and original music video, but this was still good. When I consider everything Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers had been through over the past year, I wasn't expecting them to do anything. And if they had done nothing, I probably wouldn't have even blamed them too much. But I think with everything going on at Warner Brothers being so uncertain, it kind of makes the need for an anniversary celebration all the more prevalent. And that was 2022 Year in Review in Animation. Obviously there were tons of things I wasn't able to cover, but I couldn't watch everything. Some observations? Between the Netflix thing and the Warner Brothers fiasco, I feel like this is a year where streaming as a whole kind of began to collapse in on itself. Streaming, without a doubt, has changed the way media is both consumed and created. And don't get me wrong, I love streaming and ultimately see it as a good thing. It's amazing to have such easy access to so much content, but does have its fair share of problems, and this was the year where I began to question its sustainability. I feel like the entertainment industry jumped on board the streaming service hype train because they saw that was where things were heading, but found themselves completely unprepared once they arrived at the destination. The results end up being situations like HBO Max and Netflix, where companies way overspend in order to beat out their competition, and are forced to cut back or be bought out because they aren't making back what they put in. It doesn't seem like these companies have figured out how to properly market these shows, or found ways to really make money off them, and because of this, a lot of great shows end up falling through the cracks. I don't think streaming is going to die or anything crazy like that, but I am concerned about where the industry is heading as a whole. Hopefully the people at the top take notes and reevaluate their approach to find a strategy that is better for the artist, the business, and the consumer. But enough doom and gloom, let's get on to the rankings. If I had to rank all the series that came out this year in order from worst to best, I would probably have to say number 6, Dead End Paranormal Park, number 5, The Cuphead Show, number 4, We Baby Bears, number 3, Little Demons, number 2, Don't Hug Me I'm Scared, number 1, Smiling Friends. Honestly, this year of animation wasn't really that good, at least in my opinion. If I had to grade this year, I'd probably give it a C-. Even ignoring the business side of things, it just didn't feel like there was much coming out this year. And granted, there were shows I wasn't able to talk about, but still, that's true of every year. Good year for adult animation though. As for who won the year, I would probably say Cartoon Network, finding a way to have a surprisingly good 30th anniversary despite everything going against them. 2022 might have been a somewhat lackluster year, but animation goes through rough patches all the time. And just because the year might have been slow on the whole doesn't mean that there weren't things this year that I still enjoyed. Time will only tell what 2023 will hold, but I'll be there for whatever the year has to offer. But that was just my thoughts on 2022 in animation. What new show do you think was the best or worst? And were there any major series that I missed? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I genuinely want to hear what you all think. And if you like this video, feel free to like it, subscribe, and consider checking out my Patreon if you want to see more videos like it. And as always, have a great day.